Give me a second here. Okay, here we go. We were doing really well till the dogs started barking. Ralph shaded his eyes and followed the jagged outline of the cracks up toward the mountain. This part of the beach was nearer the mountain than any other that they had seen. "We'll try climbing the mountain from here," he said. "I should think this is the easiest way. There's less of that jungly stuff and more pink rock. Come on." The three boys began to scramble up. Some unknown force had wrenched and shattered these cubes so that they lay askew, often piled diminishingly on each other. The most usual feature of the rock was a pink cliff surmounted by a skewed block, and that again surmounted, and that again, till the pinkness became a stack of balanced rock projecting through the looped fantasy of the forest creepers. Where the pink cliffs rose out of the ground, there were often narrow tracks winding upwards. They could edge along them, deep in the plant world, their faces to the rock. "What made this track?" Jack paused, wiping the sweat from his face. Ralph stood by him breathless. "Men?" Jack shook his head. "Animals?" Ralph peered into the darkness under the trees. The forest minutely vibrated. Come on, the difficulty was not the steep ascent round the shoulders of the rock, but the occasional plunges through the undergrowth to get to the next path. Here the roots and stems of creepers were in such tangles that the boys had to thread through them like pliant needles, their only guide apart from the brown ground and occasional flashes of light through the foliage. Stop. Sorry. Was the tendency of slope, whether this hole, laced as it was with the cables of creeper, stood higher than that. Somehow they moved up. Immersed in these tangles, at perhaps their most difficult moment, Ralph turned with shining eyes to the others. Wacko! Whizzers! Smashing! The cause of their pleasure was not obvious. All three were hot, dirty, and exhausted. Ralph was badly scratched. The creepers were as thick as their thighs and left little but tunnels for further penetration. Ralph shouted experimentally, and they listened to the muted echoes. "This is real exploring," said Jack. "I bet nobody's been here before." "We ought to draw a map," said Ralph, "only we haven't any paper." "We could make scratches on bark," said Simon, "and rub black stuff in." Again came the solemn communion of shining eyes in the gloom. Wacko, wizard. There was no place for standing on one's head. This time Ralph expressed the intensity of his emotion by pretending to knock Simon down. And soon they were happy, heaving pile in the underdusk. When they had fallen apart, Ralph spoke first. "Gotta get on." The pink granite of the next cliff was farther back from the creepers and trees so that they could trot up the path. This again led into more open forest so that they had a glimpse of the spread sea. With openness came the sunlight. It dried the sweat that had soaked their clothes in the dark. Feet. At last the way to the top looked like a scramble over pink rock, with no more plunging through the darkness. The boys chose their way through the defiles and over heaps of sharp stone. "Look, look!" High over this end of the island, the shattered rocks lifted up their stacks and chimneys. This one, against which Jack leaned, moved with a grating sound when they pushed. "Come on!" But not "come on" to the top. The assault on the summit must wait while the three boys accepted this challenge. The rock was as large as a small motor car. Heave! Sway back and forth, catching the rhythm. Heave! Increase the swing of the pendulum. Increase, increase, come up, and bear against that point of the furthest balance. Increase, increase, heave. So what these guys are doing right now is they're taking this beautiful pink rock and they're trying to move it so that it falls into the forest. So we first have the scar of man that comes in, right? And then now the boys are kind of walking around, eating fruit, making some messes, especially the little ones in the forest. And so they're going to continue. The great rock loitered, posed on one toe, decided not to return, moved through the air, fell, struck, turned over, leapt droning through the air, and smashed a deep hole in the canopy of the forest. Echoes and birds flew, white and pink dust floated. The forest further down shook as the passage of an enraged monster, and then the island was still. Wacko! Like a bomb. Wow! Not for 5 minutes could they drag themselves away from this triumph, but they left at last. The way to the top was easy after that. As they reached the last stretch, Ralph stopped. Golly! They were on the lip of a circular hollow in the side of the mountain. This was filled with a blue flower, a rock plant of some sort, and the overflow hung down the vent and spilled lavishly among the canopy of the forest. The air was thick with butterflies, lifting, fluttering, settling. Beyond the hollow was the square top of the mountain, and soon they were standing on it. They had guessed before that this was an island, clambering among the pink rocks with the sea on either side and the crystal heights of air. They had known by some instinct that the sea lay on every side. But there seemed something more fitting in leaving the last word till they stood on the top and could see a circular horizon of water. Ralph turned to the others. This belongs to us. It was roughly boat-shaped, humped near this end, and behind them the jumbled descent to the shore. On either side, rocks, cliffs, treetops, and a steep slope forward there, the length of a boat, a tamer descent, tree-clad with hints of pink, and then the jungly flat of the island, dense green but drawn at the end of a pink tail. There, where the island petered out in the water, was another island, a rock almost detached, standing like a fort, facing them across the green with one bold pink bastion. The boys surveyed all this, then looked out to sea. They were high up, and the afternoon had advanced. The view was not robbed of sharpness by mirage. That's a reef, a coral reef. I've seen pictures like that. The reef enclosed more than one side of the island, lying perhaps a mile out and parallel to what they now thought of as their beach. The coral was scribbled in the sea as though a giant had bent down to reproduce the shape of the island in a flowing chalk line, but tired before it had finished. Inside was peacock water, rocks and weeds, showing as in an aquarium. Outside was the dark blue of the sea. The tide was running so that long streaks of foam tailed away from the reef, and for a moment they felt that the boat was moving steadily stern. Jack pointed down. That's where we landed. Beyond falls and cliffs, there was a gash visible in the trees. There were the splintered trunks and then the drag, leaving only a fringe of palm between the scar and the sea. There, too,